The hour being 7:30, I'd like to call the Thursday, August 27th school committee meeting to order. And as a result of Governor Baker's order in March, tonight's meeting will be conducted remotely. I'll announce that all members are participating remotely during this meeting due to the unprecedented times in our Commonwealth. The governor has allowed this participation, and all votes will be taken by roll call vote. I'd also like to say that this board is very interested in returning to in-person meetings while actively maintaining all of the recommended social distancing guidance. And as soon as we have the technical and health requirements worked out, we'll be working that way. At first, we expect that some members may participate in person while others are remote based on individual circumstances, but we're working on that and hope to do it soon. So, with that said, our first order of business this evening will be a report from our Walpole High School student who used to be a junior last time we saw him, and I think you're officially a senior, Brendan, so the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, I'm Brendan Mahoney, and I'm a senior at Walpole High School. As you know, most students in the Walpole Public School System are starting on the 14th of September under a hybrid model. However, some families chose to have their students go fully remote with the remote learning management system through Edgenuity for grades 6 to 12. This system will provide students similar classes to those offered at Walpole High School, but they will be taught by other teachers not employed by Walpole Public Schools. For hybrid, there will be two groups of students, Cohort A and Cohort B, who will go to school on separate days. When students are not in school, they will be learning remotely, and all students will be learning remotely on Wednesdays. The high school will be following a 4-period, 4x4 rotating schedule for each semester, with periods 1 through 4 meeting semester 1 and periods 5 through 8 meeting semester 2. And full year classes will be completed in one semester, and half year classes will be completed in one term. As for sports, the MIAA released guidelines about fall sports last week. Fall sports will all start on September 18th, but with different guidelines depending on sport. The following sports will be allowed to practice and play games against other towns: golf, cross country, field hockey, soccer, swimming and diving, and volleyball. The high contact sports that are only allowed to be practiced at this time and have what the MIAA called the floating season are football and cheer. The floating season may allow for the sports only allowed to be practiced at the time to be played against other towns in the future. The level of participation in clubs at Walpole High School is to be determined, and freshman orientation is planned on September 8th for Cohort A and September 10th for Cohort B. Seniors receive parking spaces if they applied over the summer, and due to the hybrid schedule, there are now opportunities for juniors to park at the high school when they're in school, and the cost for the application is $40. That's all I have for tonight, so thank you.
Thank you for your unique perspective. It's a unique time, Brendan, and I think you just made history giving a report like that. Are there any questions or comments for Brendan this evening? Thanks very much. Okay, that gets us to recognitions, and we could be here all night recognizing efforts of a tremendous amount of people. But this evening we wanted to recognize our school nurses and our custodians, as well as a couple of town hall workers. Bridget, do you want to do this part, or would you prefer that I did?
Nancy, why don't you can go ahead and start, and I'm happy to jump in with anything as needed.
Okay. The amount of work that is ongoing in order to be able to open the schools is tremendous. And the amount of cooperation that we're seeing across the board, no matter who you talk about, is just something that I think our community should be very, very proud of. But this evening we want to call out and thank the nurses and the custodians, because health and safety is the guiding principle. We would not be talking about opening the schools based only on academic needs. The health and safety priorities are just tremendously important to us. So I just want to take a moment and thank these people individually. Our school nurses include Linda Anderson, Erin Foley, Kathy Garvin, Shannon Granata, Rachel Jackson, Bonnie Kowalski, Samantha Ludwig, Elizabeth Martinez, Lindsay Moyes, Ellen Newman, Stephanie Stanton, and Heather White. And equally difficult in terms of adjusting to the new requirements of their job, we're extremely grateful to the custodians that work for the Walpole Public Schools, including Joseph Atkinson, Lawrence Blaze, Michael Brennan, Al Brown, Peter Clow, Hugo Cruz, Joseph Feldman, Bob Fonseca, Frank Frucci, David Gauthier, Eric Goodwin, Edward Johnson, Ann Josie, John Kane, Scott Manson, Neil McCormick, Bob Murphy, Ralph Nyland, Dan Smith, Richard Souza, Brian Thomas, and Dave Wood. The amount of work that these people are doing is tremendous, and I think they feel a tremendous responsibility on their shoulders. So as a committee, we wanted to make sure that we took some time to honor them. In addition to that, the Board of Health, or the Health Department for the town, is the director is Melissa Ranieri, and the public health nurse, Trish Fisher. Those two individuals in particular have been tremendously involved in allowing us to open the schools. So we wanted to thank them, and Don Anderson and his whole department of the Walpole Buildings and Grounds Committee deserve a ton of credit also. There are many adaptations that have had to happen, and they have done it willingly. They have been at the beck and call of any of the administrators who have reached out to them. So all in all, we as a committee just wanted to give those people some credit tonight, because we wouldn't be where we are without them. Bridget, or anybody else? Yeah, go ahead, Bridget.
Yes, just to reiterate, yeah, the school nurses and the custodians have been, absolutely phenomenal. They've been working all summer. In terms of the nurses, even their meetings, they're planning the PD to train all the staff on the first two opening days. Really led by Kathy Garvin, changing the guidance. As we know, we keep saying flexibility and fluidity. The guidance changes, we just, had a change last week, and they've been updating those changes, and we'll get those posted to the website. But answering emails, communicating with families, and then the custodians, I think some of you were able to get in and see the schools. I mean, not only just their normal cleaning duties that they do over the summer preparation. I mean, everything looks great, but all the additional work for safety and security for our students has been tremendous. And even Don Anderson and his crew putting up all the necessary structures daily during the summer, does not go unnoticed. And then you're right, Nancy, with Melissa and Trish, they have been available to me and as well to our nursing staff at a moment's notice. I'm fortunate to have Melissa on my phone now, and whenever I need her, I text her and she gets right back to me. So thank you all. I greatly appreciate the hard work that you're doing.
Any other comments? I know everybody could reiterate the same message. As a group, we're just extremely grateful to these people, and there are many other people that deserve thanks, but it really starts with the health and safety of the students and the staff. So we wanted to start there. Okay, that gets us to the fact that there was a set of college acceptances in our packet. Bridget, do you have anything you want to say about that?
No, just in close, you should have the 2020 Walpole High School College Acceptance List. And, Walpole is proud of all of our graduates, and we wish them well in their future endeavors.
Exactly. Yeah. And just for the community's knowledge, every year there are a couple of students that choose to enter the military service. And they were recognized in June, but we're very proud of our graduates. Okay, that gets us to our next order of business, which is the second reading of some of the policies. The first one is a change to policy ACAB, which is the sexual harassment Title IX policy.
Yes, I know that the
start?
subcommittee met on August 13th and reviewed the policies, and you're being asked to review them. There's 3 of them as a second reading and vote to approve, and Dr. Quealy is here to answer, questions that you might have about the Title IX.
Dr. Quealy, can you just give us a general overview so that the listening audience would get a sense of what we're voting on and why we're voting on it?
Sure. So recently, the current federal administration made changes to the Title I or Title IX process. And so what we're doing is amending our policy to get in line with that federal mandate. So it largely changes for the process in which sexual harassment allegations are investigated, both in terms of how evidence is handled, but also what district administrators are involved in that process. Largely in the past, one administrator was involved in start to finish in terms of that process. Where now, with this new policy, there are multiple administrators who are involved in various portions of the investigation. But I can certainly answer any more specific questions that folks might have.
And you've trained the staff, or you're in the process of training the staff to understand the legal changes. Is that correct?
We were in that process. Just today, I was working on the slides that we provide to the entire staff that educates them on all the things that they need every year. We've made some changes to the handbooks in each of the buildings and each of the levels to reflect some of the new language in Title IX. I'll be working more directly with administrators who are going to be taking a more active role in investigation and decision making than they had in the past. And so those will take place as staffs return.
Thank you. Okay. Are there questions about this policy? Questions or comments? If not, Carrie?
There's a lot I want to say about this policy, so bear with me. But the first thing that I want to note is that the updated Title IX policy, which came from the Federal Department of Ed, has come up against some strong.
Yep. I think she's frozen, so we'll wait and then have her repeat.
Yeah.
Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey. And I just want to read a brief excerpt from the press release from Attorney General Healey's office, which is, it can be found on mass.gov, that explains why they oppose the policy. And it says, in the complaint filed in U.S. District Court of the District of Columbia, the attorneys general assert that the U.S. Department of Education's new rule strips students of long-standing protections against sexual harassment in violation of Title IX's mandate to prevent and remedy sex discrimination. The regulations also create onerous disciplinary proceedings that threaten to chill reporting and make it more difficult for schools to ensure equitable access to and participation in education programs and activities. And so I want to talk a little bit about the chilling effect on reporting. So I work in a middle school, and I know that the personnel that are involved in these investigations work really hard to maintain the anonymity of the alleged victims and the witnesses in cases like these, to protect them from retaliation and negative social consequences. But this policy states that before any investigation can begin, the district must send written notice to both parties, including sufficient details. And sufficient details include the identities of the parties involved in the incident. It also says that prior to completion of the investigative report, the school district will send to each party and the party's advisor, if any, the evidence subject to inspection. And they have at least 10 days to submit a written response, which the investigator will consider prior to completion of the investigative report. So once you have a policy that allows not only the victim and the witnesses' names, but everything that they state in the course of an investigation to be shared with the respondent, the anonymity and the protection that our school personnel strive to maintain goes completely out the window. You know, in my day job, I often have students come to me when they've observed or themselves been the victims of inappropriate behavior. And I can tell you that the number one factor that deters students from making formal complaints is fear of the social consequences if their peers were to find out that they came forward. So to me, this policy reinforces that fear for our students, and it further discourages them from coming forward on their behalf or on behalf of their friends or classmates. I think that personally, I'm strongly opposed in principle to the adoption of this policy, but I recognize that since it's federal law, as a school committee, our agency is minimal right now. And I know that we have a concern that if we don't have the policy on file, any investigations that we do undertake and their findings would have grounds for being dismissed if our policy did not reflect federal law. So with all of that in mind, I will, Nancy, make a motion to approve the revised ACAB Title IX sexual harassment policy with the stipulation that our policy subcommittee review said policy on or before February 1st, 2021. And the reason that I say February 1st is because I think prior to that date, we'll know if any of these lawsuits are resolved. And also at that point, we'll know whether or not there may be a new federal administration that would reconsider the implementation of this policy.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Carrie Denizio, a second by Bill Buckley. Further discussion? I think Carrie summarized it fairly well. I think that we have conflicting feelings about this. We certainly respect federal law, and we want to have integrity in our investigations. I think that the idea of putting a date for the policy subcommittee makes sense. It just sits, and I like the fact that you said on or before February 1st. It gives us the chance to be fluid if in fact something happens through the legal system. But
Ms. Gallivan?
yes, Dr. Quealy.
So I think just to add to it, and I think Ms. Denizio was frozen in a portion of her statement, there have been a number of states that have sought injunctions to prevent the implementation of this policy. To my knowledge, none of them have been successful yet. So I think the sentiment that Ms. Denizio has stated is shared by a number of attorney generals throughout the country. But to this date, I don't know of any that have been successful yet.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? If not, I'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Buckley,
Yes.
Mrs. Gayotzitz,
Yes.
Mrs. Cyrek,
Yes.
Mr. Ahern,
Yes.
Mrs. Denizio,
Yes.
sorry, Mr.
Do you hear me? Sorry. Yes.
Okay, Mr. Breen
Yes.
and Mrs. Gallivan, yes. Okay, that gets us to our next policy, which is EBCS, interim policy on COVID-related issues. Do you want to do an introduction of that, Dr. Goff, please?
Sure. So what this is that it allows the school committee really to take note of, as we know, our COVID-19 emergency and the growing number of issues that impact or affect public education. And this interim policy really, it continues to promote the safety of students and staff and maintain our educational services, and also complying with the state or the governor's orders. But then what it also does is allow the superintendent some flexibility to make decisions that might need to be done, on a moment's notice, as we know, with the guidance changes, without having to always come back to school committee or waiting for a school committee meeting. So, for example, if we need to go into a full remote, or we're going into a full in-person, looking at what that shift might be, or if we have to close a building or the school district for a period of time. It also might be, for example, allowing visitors into schools, where we have a school committee policy on that. It changes, and we have this plan, but it might allow flexibility, depending on the guidance, to allow, different people into the school based on the guidance from the governor and the state. So it's really allowing flexibility. There are some pieces of this that, of course, will allow for a school committee vote, but there are other pieces in there that just allow some flexibility due to, for example, the school committee voted on the plan, right, the reopening plan. But then we noticed the health guidance had changed last week. So therefore, then we need to go in and we need to update the back-to-school plan based on the guidance versus waiting every 2 weeks for a school committee vote.
Exactly, and the policy is long because it contains a number of examples of situations where the superintendent might exercise this guidance. Shauna Hearn wins the prize for reading in such detail to find that there was an incomplete sentence in the student absences category, and as I understand it, the issue with student absences is, in other years, if a student was not in attendance for a certain number of classes, they would not get a passing grade in that class. So what will happen this year, though, is students are going to be encouraged to stay home when they have runny noses and coughs and things that they may have been sent to school for in previous years. And there's an example of a rule that's going to have to change. And what we're saying is what it takes to get a complete class in a class, or what it takes to get a grade in a class, will have different rules this year compared to previous years.
Correct.
Does anybody have questions or comments related to this policy? If not, I'll take a motion, please.
I move to approve the policy.
Second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Gayotic, a second by Mrs. Cyrek. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Mr. Buckley?
Yes.
Ms. Gayotic?
Yes.
Ms. Cyrek?
Yes.
Mr. Ahern?
Yes.
Ms. Denizio?
Yes.
Mr. Breen?
Yes.
And Ms. Gallivan, yes. 700. Okay, that gets us to the last policy about face coverings. Dr. Goff?
Correct. If you recall, at a lot of the parent forums, there were many questions about face coverings and whether or not there was going to be a school committee policy regarding requiring face coverings and when individuals would be excused from the requirement of such. So this policy, was taken from MASC, and then also many other districts across the Commonwealth have used this policy and have voted to approve it. And I know that you've had time for a first reading, so I know that if you will entertain any questions that you may have.
questions about yes, Mrs. Denizio?
Dr. Goff, I've seen some policies regarding masks that get very specific about the type of mask that meets the district's requirements. This policy just requires face coverings, so is that as specific as we're going to be getting in terms of what constitutes the right mask or face covering for our students and staff?
That's a good question. Yeah, right now it has, you're right, it has face covering. And I know that the nurses, depending on taking a look at what the principals were mentioning, were that they weren't too keen on gaiters, the gaiter mask. They really wanted to have the actual mask instead of those gaiter face coverings. So that is their preference at this time. Unless, further guidance comes in, but they really want students and staff to wear masks versus those gaiter coverings.
Okay, and do we feel like that preference is strong enough that we need to specify that here or not?
My feeling is there are a number of things that would show up in the protocols and we may want to have it be at that level. For example, I do think that this generally covers the fact that there could be exceptions because of a special needs situation or even the age of the very young students. But we're not trying to spell that out. I think we can get more specific in this policy if we choose to, but a lot of times what we have done is let those decisions be made at the protocol level. And I think what's important is to share the information and to have the principals share it clearly so that personally, I just don't want to get into how many thread counts needs to be in the cotton that's used, and I know that you're not suggesting that, but that is an option. One would be to write in the fact that we have an opinion on gaiters. The other one would be to leave it to the administrators at the protocol level.
And then you have some, I think Dr. Quilly, like the staff wearing, and some people might wear the face shields depending on the student, and then also clear depending on the age level as well.
Yeah, I know those are going to be available largely to our staff in our high needs population classrooms, and we're preparing for that. So the shields and the gowns and ideally the shields and masks is my understanding, but we will have the face shields available to staff.
Kristen.
I just wanted to clarify that the policy is for all students, every grade level.
Thank you. Yes, it's a pre-K through 12 policy that we are entertaining this evening.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? If not, I'll take a motion, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the policy that details face coverings.
And a second, please.
Second.
We have a motion by Kristen Thyrak, a second by Shauna Hearn. Any further discussion? If not, I'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Buckley?
Yes.
Ms. Gaotitz?
Yes.
Ms. Thyrak?
Yes.
Mr. Ahern?
Yes.
Ms. Denizio?
Yes.
Mr. Breen?
Yes.
And Ms. Gallivan, yes. Okay. That gets us to our next item, which is some information that I asked to be put in the packets about vaping. We have a very excellent nursing staff, and Rachel Jackson has led the effort in this regard at Walpole High School. She is going to come to a future school committee meeting, but we decided to at least share some information tonight for two reasons. So we just wanted to make a public explanation about why there's a concern about vaping. The good news is, I think that this is more than just a Walpole statement, but the concern today is a little bit less than it was a couple of years ago. But after eliminating, almost completely eliminating cigarette smoking, vaping became a real problem in the middle schools and high schools across the country a good 5 or 6 years ago. When I first learned about it, I asked my college-age kids, and they said it was a very common thing for using to vape many forms of THC products. So marijuana, concentrated THC, and those are not the only kind of illegal products that can be vaped. But what we were also seeing was there was a lot of vaping that was happening in the high schools and eventually in the middle schools. And around the same time, we were reevaluating our chemical health policy. What we found was when we talked to parents, hardly any parents knew what vaping was at that point. And that was largely because the advertising had been targeted at video games and social media and sites that young kids were using. And a few years ago, I was attending a Drug and Alcohol Coalition meeting, and Steve Imbush was asked how big of a problem it was at Walpole High School. He described having multiple filing cabinet drawers full of confiscated devices. And he said it was a consistent problem in the bathrooms. He had a very large number of detentions and suspensions. And he said some of the devices were being used for illegal drugs, but most of them were being used for nicotine. And the nicotine vapes are the ones that we've read about a lot over the last year, where a lot of them are fruit flavored or candy flavored. And most kids don't realize that there's nicotine in them at all. And that was the concern, because nicotine is a highly addictive drug. One of the things that adults didn't realize is that there's very little smell with vaping, and it allowed kids to be able to do this without having adults even aware of it. In December of 2018, the Surgeon General declared teenage vaping an epidemic. The American Lung Association got involved, and the media outlets began covering stories about some of the extreme cases. Rachel and I have joined a statewide group that's working on just getting some free curriculum together to share with all the districts in Massachusetts. But we felt it was important for the school committee and the community to know that here in Walpole, the administration has taken basically a three-prong approach. First of all, vaping education is built into the health curriculum throughout all the grades. The consequence for vaping at school includes detentions and suspensions, and those are enforced. But the third thing that the administration did was to bring in 2 programs at Walpole High School this time last year. They started by having the principal talk to all the students at the beginning of the year, and to say that if students came forward voluntarily and asked for help with quitting, that Rachel Jackson would meet with them and help them get the help that they needed. There's a link that I shared with everyone to Drug and Alcohol Coalition meeting, and Rachel Jackson and Steve Imbush do a very nice job of explaining the program at that point. But there were a number of students on day one when Steve Imbush made this announcement. There were, I think he said there were 8 students who came down on the first day saying that they had tried, or they knew they needed to try to stop to stop vaping, and they needed help to do it. The other program that Dr. Randy Schuster was talking about in that same video clip is a program that she's a Harvard Medical School she's a doctor. I don't remember which type of doctor, but she's developing some research on vaping, and anybody who didn't opt out at the high school last year was part of a survey that she asked people to do. And then she ended up, of the people who volunteered to be part of the survey, she got 2 groups that she has studied across the year. One group is students that were not vaping and promised to not vape and promised to get tested to prove that they were not vaping over the course of the year. The other group of students was a group of students who were actively vaping. They volunteered to try to get tested regularly and be part of a cessation group. And we just felt it was important for the school committee and the community to be aware of this, because layer on COVID-19 at this point, and lung health is an extremely important consideration for everyone. And given the fact that there were students last year who were looking for help, we felt it was important to share with the students and with the family that there has been what they would say is a significant difference at the high school last year compared to 2, 3, and 4 years ago, where they feel like they're beginning to help students understand that there's a potential to get very addicted through these the use of nicotine vapes. And Rachel's going to come to a future meeting, but we just felt it was important to get some information out at the beginning of the school year. Are there any questions or comments on this? If not, we'll get to the superintendent's report.
Thanks. So as I mentioned in my email to staff yesterday, to say this has been a typical summer has really been an understatement. As you know, we've all been working around the clock this summer to prepare for the opening of schools. With the help of the principals and the leadership team, last week we held forums for preschool families, kindergarten, elementary, which was 1 through 5, middle and high school families, and then also for staff. I'd like to thank Ann Arpin, our digital learning coordinator, who really helped facilitate all of these forums for us. And Kathy Garvin, our head nurse, was also present at all these meetings. And as we mentioned earlier tonight, it's been extremely helpful and informative regarding the health and safety of our students and staff. It was a great turnout all around. I think the one evening we did the 1 through 5, and then the secondary, we had well over 1,000 participants join us at these levels. The principals are now in the process or have just completed. They're holding their individual meetings. Ours was more at the general level, and then we were getting more specific at the building levels to answer those questions. And once those are complete, then I'll work with central office leadership to put together, more of that broad general Q&A. And it's really important for all of us to be aware, and I keep saying this, that the guidance frequently changes. I mentioned an example that at the general forums, Kathy Garvin presented, and then last week, some of the health guidance changed, so she's updating this guidance. She's, presenting it to all the families. Actually, last week at her first building meeting, I think it changed hours before. She had the first individual building meeting, and then we'll make sure that we post any changes on the website. Just also to note, other items that we posted on our website is the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has a fall FAQ, question and answer, and that was, came out on the 26th, and so we posted that. Stop the Spread press release is also posted, and that's almost like a mobile unit that we can take advantage of if there were an uptick or an outbreak, and there's certain metrics, and we work with the Board of Health on that, so that's also on the website. We've had there's joint guidance on the modified sports seasons for the school year that Brendan talked about. There's guidance on interpreting the metrics of what a red is, a yellow, a green, a white community, all of those, the community colors. So those are on the websites as well, and there's a little PowerPoint there that gives what those metrics mean. In terms of PPE, equipment, signage, ventilation, picnic tables, tents, all of the above, Mike Frisch has done an excellent job securing all of this and working with Don Anderson at getting it set up at all the schools. We are also working with Ann Arpin, again, Director of Digital Learning, to extend Wi-Fi in certain areas outdoors as well. You can't go up into the woods and pitch a tent with it, but and get some Wi-Fi, but right outside will enable our students to continue their learning. So that's nice. So thanks to Ann Arpin and Mike for doing that. I do know that several school committee members were able to take part in the building walkthroughs this week to see the signage, the arrows, our cleaning products, and classroom setups. And I think a couple of school committee members were able to take some pictures of a couple pictures of a classroom of a K and I think a 1, and post that. So thank you for doing that, because I know some families wanted to see what an elementary classroom can look like, and so I appreciate that. Central office spent the better part of Monday and Tuesday this week contacting approximately 400 families to confirm their selection of hybrid or the remote management learning program. Principals are working on their cohorts, and those will be released as soon as possible. The high school they were able to release theirs, and as mentioned, so cohort A, last name A through J, and cohort B, last name K through Z. And so if there are siblings at the elementary or middle school level, and as you know, we're keeping families together, then those families then would know their cohorts. But as you know, it's a little more comprehensive at the elementary level, where they're trying to balance out groupings and being able to balance out individual students' needs as well as gender. So it takes a little bit more time. For those who chose the remote learning management program, we are in the queue to set up Ingenuity models 6 through 12 and identifying staff to help manage and facilitate the system. In K through 5, although we're still waiting on those final numbers for the remote learning management program, we've been moving forward identifying staff, and hopefully by next week we'll have the staff finalized and identify those rosters for each staff member. So those families will receive notification, obviously, before the start of the school year on September 14th. Please recognize that, we're working on both a hybrid and remote learning management program is quite an undertaking. We're essentially building an entirely new school, when you do the remote piece. And while at the same time, trying to provide an opportunity for students to transition back and forth. So like I said, it's quite an undertaking. In terms of special education, we do realize that there are several questions as to how special education services would look, And Dr. Quilly sent out a letter to families clarifying the sequence of the steps. So basically, the first step, just to summarize, is really what we're doing is determining how many students will be in the hybrid and remote model. And we think we've got a high percentage after making those phone calls on Monday and Tuesday, because the special education planning process is entirely dependent on an accurate count of how many students will be in each of those models. And then each building creates a master schedule, which is created or being created. And then once that master schedule is created, then it creates the framework for which the special education staff will conduct their schedules. And then the next step is special education services are created, and these schedules are influenced again by the schedule and the district's guidelines also around social distancing. And then communicating that to families, that special education staff in the buildings, they'll be providing all families with a form that will outline what services are delivered and what services may be delivered differently and how this will occur. And they will be notifying them leading up in the coming weeks up to the first day of school, and then some shortly thereafter. So any questions or dialogues surrounding the student schedule on an individual educational plan really can be directed to the appropriate team chairs first, as they would have most understanding of this firsthand knowledge. And Dr. Cooley is also always available to answer questions. We know the criteria for the day 4 attendance for some IEP students. That was based on the guidance given to us by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. It was necessary to set certain limits, and I think we discussed this in a school committee meeting earlier. Entering the building so we can maintain appropriate distancing. However, once the school begins, we will be reassessing the possibility of widening the criteria, which may allow for more 4-day students. So Dr. Quilly will keep us updated as this develops. We also, I'm gonna let Bill, so not to steal his thunder, Assistant Superintendent Bill Hahn, talk a little bit about our staff, our new staffing, because believe it or not, we did have time to do our new staff orientation this week, which Bill Hahn led, and talk a little bit about professional development in the next 2 weeks.
You want me to go now, Bridget, or
Sure.
Okay. As Dr. Goff just mentioned, this week we welcomed over 25 new staff members to Walpole Public Schools. I will not mention everything we did in our intensive 4-day orientation program, but I do want to highlight a few programs and several staff to thank them publicly for coming in to present to our new staff. We obviously start our orientation on Monday with a welcome from all building and central administration, and Ann Arpin came to do a full Walpole Public School technology orientation, and I want to thank Ann and her team for their work on Monday. Tuesday was probably our busiest day. We had an overview of our strategic plan and introductions to human resources information, and Bailey Tai, who is an English teacher from the high school, came and gave a phenomenal presentation on ensuring equity and cultural proficiency. Tuesday afternoon, we had 2 large programs. Jill Masterson, who's a math coach from Johnson Middle School, and John O'Leary, who's an assistant principal for Byrne Middle School, did a phenomenal presentation on multi-tiered systems of support, oftentimes referred to as RTI. And School Resource Officer Hart arrived later in the afternoon with his team to complete a comprehensive ALICE training. On Wednesday, to model some aspects of our hybrid model, we did virtual orientation, where we reviewed our educator evaluation system. And then the rest of the morning and the entire afternoon was dedicated to school adjustment counselor Sarah Scales from Johnson Middle School, who did a comprehensive presentation on social emotional learning and bullying and cyberbullying prevention training. And today was our last day. Mike Donahue, who is the social studies department chair from Walpole High School, presented on understanding by design curriculum development, and Dave Cuzzy and some members of the executive board from the Walpole Teachers Association came to introduce themselves and welcome all of our staff to the Walpole Teachers Association Union. And then at the end of the day, we were glad we could buy them lunch, since we had some limitations this year on food and limitations on being able to eat together. That was a nice way to end the program. So I'm grateful for all the fantastic presenters that came. We got a lot of great feedback and reviews from our new staff, and I'm excited for Walpole Public Schools and all the incredible staff that we welcome this week. So next week, as everyone knows, we'll be welcoming back our entire staff. And as you know, DESE advised districts to utilize more time at the start of the year to provide important professional development to all staff. Our regular 2 days of professional development have been expanded to 8 days, pushing our start date, as hopefully everyone knows, to September 14th. Some aspects of our opening will look similar to years past. We'll be welcoming back our staff, introducing all of our new staff, and recognizing staff who've completed 25 years of service. Teachers and support staff will be given time in their individual buildings to set up their classrooms, meet with grade level and curriculum teams, and connect with their colleagues. However, the additional days will be crucial to provide professional development and training. Kathy Garvin, our nurse leader, who was mentioned several times tonight, and her team have created a comprehensive safety and health training for all staff that will be tailored and presented to each individual building. Mike Frisha and the custodial staff will review new safety and cleaning protocols that is important for all of our staff to know and be ready to implement. Ann Arpin and her digital learning team will provide tailored professional development to staff across all grade levels, so we're ready to provide both in-person and remote instruction during hybrid learning. And in addition, we'll provide training with Edgenuity courseware platform for all relevant staff in grades 6 to 12, and utilize the additional days to finalize staffing and plans for our K-5 remote learning management system. So needless to say, we'll be busy, and we're grateful for the additional days, the very necessary and very appropriate additional days for professional development and individual growth in staff. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hahn. Just in closing, this opening for this school year, it's important to remember, like, no one has ever done this before, right? No one. And we talk about hybrid, we talk about remote learning management program, and we throw these out like there was someone who's told me like they're our old friends. But in fact, we've just met them, and we're going to learn from our experiences, we're going to get feedback and become better based on our efforts, and that's what we're committed to doing, and we're looking forward and excited to start the school year.
We're lucky to have you as our leaders, because that is the right attitude. We can't expect everything to be perfect at the very, very start of the day, but you're doing your best to make it as perfect or close to perfect as you can, and adjust when that doesn't happen. So we're very appreciative. Before I ask for questions, Kristen or Jen or Carrie, do any of you guys have some things you want to add about the tours of the school? Go ahead, Kristen.
Sure. It was really impressive. I think when, we read the DESE guidance and we heard all the stories, we thought it was going to be like very stark and very sparse. But I think, everything looked, I'm not going to say normal. It looked fairly normal. It still looked like school. There were a lot of signage and directions at both the high school and the middle school about traffic flow and where to go. We saw, a table full of PPEs and other supplies, talked about how things will be sanitized. So it looked, a lot of it looked fairly normal. We saw the picnic tables and tents and all the additional things. And I was mostly impressed with the elementary school, both the first grade and kindergarten class that we looked at, because there weren't things to touch on the bulletin boards, but it's still, the same welcome and same sunny things posted on the bulletin boards for those grades. So it still looked a lot like what you would expect to see in any other year. So I was really impressed with what's been done so far. Thank you.
Jen, go ahead.
Yeah, Yeah, so I wanted to say that I know a lot of parents had concerns about whether or not you'd be able to hear the teachers over either the sounds of the fans or if they were in an interior room where we purchased the HEPA filters, that they'd be loud and the teachers wouldn't be able to project. And we actually listened to the HEPA filters. They were very quiet. Even on the highest level, you could still hear. The fans were fairly quiet, and I know that we looked into getting some sort of inserts to put into the masks so that teachers could project their voices. So, you know, we're really thinking about that kind of stuff, and I was happy to see, you know, the kindergarten classroom, we toured that, and the one that we saw was set up in like a circular pattern so that the kids could actually look at each other and they wouldn't feel isolated. I know other parents had some concerns about that I was reading. So, you know, trying to find the silver lining in all of this, the smaller class sizes, I think the students trying to face each other, I think the teachers will be able to project. So it's not going to be normal, but I think we've done a great job, and the administrators have really talked to other districts. They kind of came up with best practices and are really doing their best with, you know, very difficult circumstances. So having a kindergartner coming in, walking into that classroom, I just had, you know, breathed a sigh of relief and said, okay, I can see sending my kid here. And it just made me feel good. So thank you guys.
Go ahead, Carrie.
Dr. Goff said something about, you know, having only just met these models. And I have to say, just throughout the last several months, but especially touring the buildings, you'd never know that was the case. Just the level of preparation really shines through. And I think, you know, we spoke to administrators on every level from preschool to high school, and it was clear that each of them were taking into consideration the developmental and academic needs of their population of students. It doesn't look the same in the preschool as it does in the middle school. It doesn't look the same in the elementary school as it does in the high school. People are really being thoughtful. And I think the other thing that I don't think I realized as I was in the buildings, but kind of after the fact, you know, seeing the way that teachers had already been in and designed a seating plan for some classrooms, seeing the tool that the middle school custodian made to make sure that desks were exactly 6 feet apart in every direction. You just could sense, I think, the pride that our staff has in doing this work. They do want to do everything they can for the kids. They want this to be the best possible experience it can be. And I was really gratified and proud of that. And I think that it starts at the top. And so you deserve such a tremendous amount of credit for everything that's happened so far. And I think we are as ready as we could possibly be to welcome our students back this fall.
Well said, everybody. I thought it was really interesting too. I would not want to be in charge of any of the buildings, but especially wouldn't want to be in charge of the high school just because of the number of people that you have to manage in that building. And Stephen Bush had a map of the building for all of us visual learners, and it was perfect because it took what felt like a completely unmanageable task and made you realize, wow, they've given it, as everyone has said, a tremendous amount of thought. And yeah, they really are going to continue now to work as they bring the staff in, because the reality is, as thorough as the administrators and the teams may have been, there are going to be some things that other individuals notice, and but they have time to fine tune that. So that's wonderful. Before I go to questions, I just wanted to go back to you, Brendan. I thought when you were doing your presentation that you talked about the fact that they're going to do some kind of an orientation for 9th graders. Was there something about that, and do we know the date of it?
Yeah, the orientation for cohort A is supposed to be September 8th, and for cohort B, it's supposed to be September 10th. And I also believe that tomorrow, student council is making a video for like the upperclassmen, that just like showing like the paths and hallways and stuff. So, yeah.
That's wonderful. And I know that the middle schools are also looking for a way to do a chance to begin to orient the students to the building, because it's scary if you haven't been there before, and a little bit of effort will go a long way. So thank you. That's great. Okay, questions or comments about any part of the superintendent report? Guess you did a great job there, Bridget.
Thanks. I just said, there's just one request after Mr. Imbush's charts and diagrams. Mr. Connor has requested not to follow him anymore when we do building tours. So duly noted.
Okay, that gets us to the next item, which is the MSBA report. Dr. Goff.
Yes, MSBA is still with Compass and Tepe. You know, we've been meeting. Our next meeting will be in September. We usually meet on Thursday afternoons. We did not meet this week or last week, but we will be meeting next week. And I think after that meeting, when we take a look at the dates for the community forums and what the fall will look like, it may be beneficial for some of us to meet, and we'll be able to give you an update at that next school committee meeting after the September 1st MSBA meeting with our building base with Compass and Tepe. And I know Mark has been a part of it as well.
Mr. Breen.
I would just say that I think we're at the point where the pace begins to pick up after September. So we are about 14 months away from this going to town meeting, whatever the option might be. So just a thought.
That's a very good point, Mark. I was looking at the information from MSBA today, and yeah, the pace is definitely different. This fall, we're talking about doing a community forum possibly during the month of September. So starting at next school committee meeting, we'll be building towards the information that people want to know. But there's a piece of the work that needs to get or that we're scheduled to submit in November. So in order to get to that point, it's going to be an exciting time, but it's also going to be an equally important piece of work. And I was almost afraid to talk to Dr. Goff about this because of all the things we just talked about. But when I was asking her about the MSBA, I could tell that there's energy for that project too, which is amazing. So we appreciate that very much. Any questions related to that? Stay tuned. Okay, subcommittee. We had a list of the subcommittees in our packet, and I've talked to a bunch of people. So Mary, I have some information for you. I can confirm this with you in the morning, but Kristen said that she would join the policy subcommittee. Carrie said she would join the superintendent evaluation committee. Sean is interested in joining the curriculum committee, and the wellness committee. And Bill, I plugged you into legislative committee because you're always my go-to person anyway. I think it makes sense to continue with the idea of having all of us serve as the budget subcommittee, because this is such an unusual year, and I think there's a lot of learning that we can do together. We've also assigned communications to everybody, and a thought that I had for this year is to divide that up a little bit and maybe get a little bit more effective even. Mark, Jen, and I are on the MSBA subcommittee. So if we feel the responsibility of making sure we share information with the rest of you, that will help everybody be able to speak about that item. Kristen and Sean and either Carrie or Jen, I was going to ask you guys to think about being the PAC liaisons, because that if we do it that way, we'll have a representative from each of the different age groups. And then Bill, Carrie, and I have met with the boosters at the high school at least once, but that's another group that we're going to want to stay in touch with. So if that sounds okay with people, that's great. If other people have other opinions, now's the time to let me know. But that's what I was thinking about communication. Any thoughts about that? Seeing some nodding. Bill?
Through you, Madam Chair, I agree. I think it's good that we all stay on budget and we kind of pick off different areas to focus on in communication, and I think I would just leave it open-ended. Given the fact that we didn't anticipate COVID and reopening and the like, I'm sure there'll be other things and areas to focus on that we haven't even thought about yet. So I think it's a good plan going forward. Plug me in wherever.
No, that's just it. I think the good news is we have a very cooperative committee, and everybody who was asked to do anything, just immediately said yes to it, which is awesome. And, I think that it's just going to be important to support the administration in the communication that they have clearly bought into being a part of. So the only other thing that is left open then is a representative to the Drug and Alcohol Coalition. If anybody is interested in doing that, I would highly recommend it. It's not a lot of work in that the administration, we always have school administrators at those meetings. There are probably 9 at most meetings across the year, once a month. And Melissa Ranieri from the health department runs them. She runs one in the morning and one in the evening, and it's always the same content. So it would just be a matter of attending one of those meetings as much as you can. We can divide it up if a few people want to. I know I've learned a lot by attending some of those meetings, but definitely haven't been able to get to all of them. So if anybody wants to volunteer now, that's fine. Otherwise, I'm just going to, ask you to get in touch with me or Mary if you have a specific interest. Otherwise, that's going to be all school committee members, and we'll do our best there also. Any other thoughts? Carrie, I left you as the backup to Sean at warrants and payroll, okay? Great. All right. So I think we're good with that. And Mary, I'll confirm with you in the morning on all of this, all right? So the next item is the policy subcommittee meeting. I don't know that there's anything that anybody wants to mention about that, but Kristen was there, Jen was there. Anything you guys want to add? I think we pretty much covered it. Okay? Then that gets us to the school committee workshop that we had on August 20th. I just wrote myself a note to thank everybody for the collaborative spirit that we've had. And I don't mean not us 7 people specifically, but the administration, the union leadership, the nurses, the custodians, everybody is coming together in a nice collaborative way. But is there anything that anybody else wants to mention about the workshop? Just for the listening audience, I would just mention that one of the things we went into was where we are financially, knowing that we really had to pay attention to the personal protective equipment and some extra costs, but Mike Frisha has that well handled. We also talked about the fact that he is going to be confirming who's going to use the bus and who's not going to use the bus, and in some cases that's going to, well, probably in most cases, it's going to involve some form of a refund if people have paid for a 5-day bus program. Same with the use of the parking spaces at the high school, since not everybody, there's nobody who's going to be using a 5-day parking space. So I think that what needs to happen is Mike needs to get answers from everybody so that he can do it all at once as opposed to bit by bit. But that was covered in the workshop, along with a lot of the things that were discussed about the reopening of school that has already come up in tonight's meeting. Anything else? Then the last thing I just wanted to mention is the fact that as a group, we have been developing a message to the community because there's so much work that has been going on with the administrators and the school staff throughout the last, well, pretty much nonstop since they knew that they were going to have to plan for an unusual opening. And what we now want to do is talk to the community about the fact that we're going to need help from the community in order to succeed with the opening of school. I think that Walpole has always, in my opinion, risen to the occasion, and we'll do that again this time. But we know that in order to let the schools stay open, that we also have to pay attention to what we're all doing outside of school. And sometime in the near future, the community will be getting a communication from us as school committee members as we work on this message. But essentially, what we want to say is we know that so many people have reached out to us over the last couple of months, and just about everybody has started or ended their message with saying, thank you so much for all the work that you've done. And for that reason, I think we're very confident that the community is going to be supportive of really enforcing social distancing and stepping up to help us have the most likely success as we start the school year. So I don't know if there are any people that want to comment beyond that, but I did just want to mention that we're working on a communication to the community because our teachers and our staff as a whole deserve us to come together with that community support that we can really, we know we're good at, but we're really going to be asking people to actively participate in some good community support. Are there any people that want to add to that? I know we're still crafting the message, but I think we're well on our way. All right. If not, then Mary, do we have any citizens who called in to comment? Nothing. Okay, so that gets us to warrants, donations, and minutes. Sounds like that's you, Sean.
Excellent. So I would like to make a motion to approve the following expense warrants for the amounts listed in your packet. Those warrants are number 221006, 221007, 221008, and 221008.
Second.
Perfect. We have a motion by Mr. Ahern, a second by Mrs. Syrak. All those, oh no, I need to do a roll call vote. That, Mr. Buckley,
Yes.
Ms. Gaeltitz,
Yes.
Ms. Syrak,
Yes.
Mr. Ahern,
Yes.
Ms. Denizio,
Yes.
Mr. Breen,
Yes.
and Ms. Gallivan, yes. So 700. And you have some payrolls also, Sean, is that right?
That is correct. I would like to make a motion to approve the following payroll warrants for the amounts listed in your packets. Number 2106, P as in Paul, A as in Alpha. 2106, P as in Paul, B as in Beta.
Second.
Again, we have a motion by Mr. Ahern, a second by Mrs. Syrak, sorry, Mrs. Denizio. And a roll call vote, Mr. Buckley,
Yes.
Ms. Gaeltitz,
Yes.
Ms. Syrak,
Yes.
Mr. Ahern,
Yes.
Ms. Denizio,
Yes.
Mr. Breen,
Yes.
Ms. Gallivan, yes. Okay, and there were no gifts or donations, but there are minutes that I need a motion to approve, please.
I'll go ahead. I'd like to make a motion to approve the following school committee minutes. School committee meeting minutes for August 6th, 2020, policy subcommittee meeting minutes for August 13th, and school committee workshop meeting minutes for August 20th, 2020.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Syrak, a second by Ms. Denizio. Roll call vote, Mr. Buckley,
Yes.
Ms. Gaeltitz,
Yes.
Ms. Syrak,
Yes.
Mr. Ahern,
Yes.
Ms. Denizio,
Yes.
Mr. Breen,
Yes.
and Ms. Gallivan, yes. Okay, I think that's it. Mr. Breen, take us home.
I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Breen, a second by Ms. Syrak. I'm just gonna say, all those in favor, aye.
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 Great job, administrators. You're doing a great job, and thank you, Brendan. I know it's an unusual year. We're glad to see you, and let's hope that it's a good one.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.